You guys, we have a really special treat today because it's great when we have guest speakers that are not just, like, we're really particular about who we have here. And today we get the honor of having Pastor Becky Johnson from Jesus Culture in Sacramento being here. She's the executive pastor there. She has been under Banning Liebscher's ministry and for a long time. And Banning is a good friend of ours at this church, and he's been here multiple times. Becky came to our youth conference, and I was here on Friday night. She did our women's event. How many of you ladies were here? Yeah, I was here too. Because I'm married to the women's pastor. And so I got to sneak in, and I was like on the verge of tears through most of that message. God was just changing me, and it affected me, and it changed how I prayed on Saturday morning and this morning because some of the stuff that God was doing. And I was just like, you ladies got it going on when you get together. Come on, sister. That was awesome. And I said sister, that sounded weird because you're my wife, but I mean, come on, ladies. Anyway, so today's going to be a great day. I want you to have a really open heart to receive the Word of God because it's going to be really something that could mark your life for a long time. I haven't taken this many notes in a message, I don't know, maybe in 2 years. Like, it's just been so rich for me. Please give a huge New Vintage welcome to Pastor Becky Johnson.
Much. Ladies, who was here on Friday nights? Come on. The ladies of New Vintage are up to something. Men, I don't know what's going on at the fire gathering, but y'all need to, I think you should change the name to Flourish. And I'm so excited to be here, excited for second service because no time limit. So I'm just kidding. Just want to say, I know you're thinking about lunch. I know how it goes. Okay, so a couple things. I forgot to do this in first service, but Jamie's my assistant, and she's here with me, and this is her home church. So I just want to say, she attended church here for 7 or 8 years and did youth group and worship here. And whatever y'all did here at New Vintage to disciple and raise up Jamie, we are reaping the benefits of. She is a superstar. This girl just keeps showing up and just impressing us. She's incredible, administrative, responsible, but an anointed worship leader. To have those two things. I'm married to a worship pastor, so I understand that worship people are not normally responsible, administrative. Like, they're like, we just want to worship Jesus in a field, and who cares about what time it is? Jamie is like this beautiful mix of both incredible, powerful young woman of God. And so she's here. So it's really, I'm here with Jamie because she knows everybody. It's Jamie's homecoming. So she's here and looking fabulous in her power suit there. So say hi to Jamie before we leave and go back to California. I am the executive pastor at Jesus Culture Sacramento. I've been on staff there for a long time, 12 years. I was the youth pastor for 7.5 years. And in January, since we started the church in 2013, I was the youth pastor. And then in January of 2022, became executive pastor. So wrapping up my first year as executive pastor. And it's been a lot of fun. And I have a cute family. They're going to show you guys. This is my family. And I brought that picture to just tease you guys for the California weather. Like, I'm just so mean. I'm so mean. So that's my husband, Derek. We've been married for 14 years. He's our worship pastor. And Lucy is my 9-year-old. Julian is my 4-year-old. That's a rare sighting of him clothed. Normally he's naked, and that is legitimate, yeah. And then Vera is my baby, and my last one there, she's 18 months old. And we found out that we wanted 3 kids. That's all that we want. We don't want any more. We shouldn't have any more. We cannot have any more. So that's it. And I love them. I really like her. I'm glad she came out the way she did. So the holidays are coming up, guys. Thanksgiving is just right around the corner, and I love the holidays. I don't know how many of you do Christmas music before Thanksgiving. How many of you are saved in the room? Okay. The rest of you, we're going to pray for you, but I love Christmas so much. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Indiana, right actually near Chicago area. So we had snow, we had white Christmases, the cold weather. I love being here. I love that I could see my breath. Like, I love that so much. I miss that. And so I love the holidays and all the Christmas things, and we have our tree up and all that good stuff. But the problem with that is, so I'm an idealist. Like I have a picture in my head of how everything's going to be, and I just tend to idealize things. Like, when I think about family vacation, I'm like, it's going to be amazing at Disneyland, and we're going to get the cutest pictures, and no one's going to have a meltdown, and it's not going to break our budget. Like I just get this perfect picture. I don't know how many of you are idealistic that way. And so that's okay if you're that way when you marry someone who's not that way, because it's a really beautiful balance where the spouse that's the idealist is like, we're going to do this, and then the realistic spouse is like, don't even get your hopes up. That's not how it's going to be. Everyone's going to be crying. We're going to do potty breaks. We're going to be broke. We're going to be arguing, and you have this beautiful balance. Now, what's happened in my life is I married an idealist also. So we're both idealistic. So we get these pictures in our head. Our kids are not idealists. Listen, kids don't care about the picture in your head at all. So what happens is Christmas comes around, the holidays come around, and I haven't, I've been a mom for a decade now, and I have not learned my lesson. I think about Christmas, and I'm like, we're going to get the tree out, and it's going to be this beautiful moment, and wait till everybody on Instagram sees how perfect my life is, and my kids are going to be in cute matching pajamas, and we're going to make cookies, and we're going to build gingerbread houses. Last week, we put our tree up. My 2-year-old's in the tree. She's climbing up the tree. I'm trying to pull her out. The cat, also, I forgot to mention this. We have a cat that's also in the tree. The flocking, I hate myself, so I bought a flocked tree. The flocking is just spilling everywhere. My 4 and my 9-year-old are screaming at each other, and who's going to do the tree topper? I'm in like fleece pajamas because I want to pretend I don't live in California. I'm just sweating as Derek and I are arguing. He's like, would you quit trying to take a picture and just plug in the lights on the other end? And we're just arguing. There's just complete chaos. It's not the idealistic picture at all in my head. And, but on Instagram, it's, here's my world, happy holidays, 'tis the season. And everybody's smiling, for the 0.3 seconds that we were able to fake it there. So I'm going back to that. I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Thanksgiving is just, you're going to see the best part. That's what you're going to see on social media there. So that's my family. That's a little bit about me. I would usually spend a little bit more time getting you to buy into me, so you'll just have to trust that I'm amazing, I'm funny. Matt and Lisa really love me, and Austin and I are friends, and we're going to open up the Word. I'm really excited about this Word. I feel like it's profound and something that is really important for us to press into as we approach even something like the holidays and the new year. So you open up your Bibles to Joshua chapter 4. Joshua chapter 4, it's page 282. That's a youth pastor joke. All the teenagers be like, what? Not in my Bible. I'm like, you don't even act like you have your Bible with you, you teenager. All right. So Joshua chapter 4, let me give you a little bit of history real quick. So the children of God, the Israelites, his chosen nation and people, they are living in captivity. They're in slavery, ruled by Pharaoh in Egypt. And they're crying out to God for liberation. God hears their cry and sets a plan in motion to lead them to freedom, raises up a man named Moses. And Moses, along with his brother Aaron, are going to lead God's people out of captivity and into the promised land that's been promised to them generations ago. And so Moses confronts Pharaoh, let my people go, all the things. Pharaoh says no, the plagues, the whole thing happens. God sends these plagues on them, and finally Pharaoh relents and says, go, take them with you, go and serve your God. And they're gonna leave Egypt and leave slavery, and it's the Exodus. This is where we get the book Exodus. It is the Exodus story, and as they are leaving Egypt and stepping out of slavery towards their promised land, they get to the Red Sea. The enemies are behind them. It's this beautiful cinematic moment where, the enemies are coming. Pharaoh and his armies are approaching, and they're going to stop them. And God splits the Red Sea, and we love that story, and that we love to sing about it, write about it, tattoo it, embroider it, and we love the splitting of the Red Sea. And they walk through the middle of the sea into their freedom. And now they're in the wilderness, and they wander in the wilderness for a long time. Israel ends up wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. It's an 11-day journey to their promised land. It takes them 40 years. A man must have been leading them. Did not ask for directions. Your husband must have been leading. And so 40 years, and now here they are. Moses is died. They have a new leader in Joshua, and they're about to enter the promised land. And where we're picking up, this is where we are in the story. They're about to enter the promised land. They have to cross the Jordan River with the Ark of the Covenant, which contains the presence of God, so you can't touch it or drop it. Simple task. And it's the last barrier to the promised land. God leads them to the Jordan River at the fullest time that the river, like the time of year where the river is at its fullest. It's flood season, it's peak season, so the waters are turbulent, and they need a miracle. They need a miracle to cross this river, and God does it. He dries up the Jordan, and they cross on dry land with the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of the Testimony, and they do it. It's miraculous. It's a beautiful story, and right afterwards, they receive a very specific instruction from God himself. Let's read Joshua 4, verse 1. When all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, 'Take 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you, and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight.' Then Joshua called the 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, 'Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel.'" There were 12 tribes, so they take 12 men, take 12 stones. "That this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, 'What do those stones mean to you?' Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever." And the people of Israel did just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, just as the Lord told Joshua. And they carried them over with them to the place where they lodged, and laid them down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the covenant had stood. And they are there to this day. For the priests bearing the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished, that the Lord commanded Joshua to tell the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. In life, we understand that the things we care about the most take first priority. Often, whatever you address first is what you care about the most, or what is the most important to you, right? We understand, like when I get home from work, I'm a working mom, I work out of the home Monday through Thursday. The first thing I do when I get home from work is check in on my kids. First thing, I check in on the baby. Did she eat? Did she nap? How's she doing? Are the other two, all the limbs there? Is everybody good? Checking in, I'm hugging, we kiss the babies, right? Because they're the most important thing to me. So my first priority when I get home is to check in on the kids. Most parents probably do that. Unless you don't like them very much, then you check in on the dogs first, right? If you have teenagers, you're like, they're fine. You're checking in on some other things. So whatever's most important to you. We know this when we teach teenagers to drive. We teach them first priority. Check your mirrors, buckle your seatbelt, then you start the car. We don't say, hey, after you drive a little bit, then buckle up, or, when you get there, check your mirrors and make sure that you can see everything. First things first priority. So in this story, God has them do an interesting thing as they enter the promised land. God has them set up these stones. We're going to call them stones of remembrance, memorial stones. He has them set up these stones to create a memorial. Immediately, the first thing God instructs them to do in the promised land is set up memorial stones. I'm so practical. I'm thinking, when I'm getting over into the promised land after wandering for 40 years, and people have died to get here, and we got men, women, and children, the first thing I'm going to do is should we do a head count? Where's the moms in the room, right? Or the youth pastors? I'm like, count off heads. Did Timmy miss the bus again? Let's make sure everybody's here. God's like, no, don't do that. Or how about let's figure out where are we going to sleep? Where's the food source? Where's the water source? They have enemies in the promised land that they're going to have to fight. Should we prepare for battle? Should we scope the land? There's a lot of things that we would think are first priority, but God says, hold on, first things first, build a memorial. God says, stop. Before you do anything else, you are going to want to remember this moment. How you start out in the promised land is very important. How you begin in your victory What you do first after your breakthrough is very important. And God places a priority on these stones of remembrance because he understands the power and benefit of remembering his works. Listen, you and I are called. This is not a suggestion. This is a call and a mandate and a command from the Lord. We are called to remember the goodness of God in our lives. And we see this in Scripture. Remembering is a recurring theme in Scripture. Early on, God establishes this value with his people. The Psalms are saturated in remembering what God did, recalling the works of the Lord. In the Old Testament, when something prolific happened with God, they built a monument, they built a memorial, they built an altar. They understood, I want to remember when God spoke to me. I want to remember that dream. I want to remember that promise. And so God establishes this early on. Remember my works. Remember what I'm doing in your life. Jewish culture is just built around telling stories on what God did and festivals and rituals and traditions, the Passover. It's about remembering what God did. So we are called today to place stones of remembrance throughout our lives. It's an old covenant practice, but a new covenant principle. And the thing is, there is great blessing in remembering and great pain in forgetting. There's blessing in remembering the works of God, but there is also pain in forgetting what he's done in your life. And the pain of forgetting manifests in when we forget what God has done in our life. When we fail to accurately remember and recall what he's doing, we will begin to limit God. And all of a sudden what happens is we begin to have this narrative of our life that's about us. Like we actually think we made something happen. When we don't remember all the little ways God came through and moved, we will begin to think we made something happen. It's amazing. And Americans are notorious for this. We just love a good self-made story. Like we love the self-made millionaire. We love the tough work. Like, granddad walked 10 miles in the snow to, he was born with a hammer in his hand and he just worked really hard. You ask people like, how'd you get to where you are? I go, my hard work ethic, that's how. I got where I am, not getting sissied like the next generation. I worked really hard to get where I am, and that's what the next generation's missing is hard work. And, I got calluses on my hands and my own grit. And I'm like, you got where you are because of the mercy and kindness of God. He gave you that work ethic. He was with you in that hard time. Like you are standing where you are. Your life is a complete testament to the mercy of Jesus. But when we attribute what's happening to ourselves, that's when we forget what God has done. And then we look to the future and think, what can I do? And we don't believe for more. We stop accessing faith to believe for the impossible situation because we have a narrative that we made everything happen. It wasn't God. It was me and my hard work and my determination and my perseverance. And so it's going to be my hard work and my determination and my perseverance and my money that gets me where I'm going in my future. And that's the pain in forgetting. That's the pain in getting disconnected from this habit and discipline of remembering. And the reality is, don't feel bad about this because it's just human nature. We forget, and God knows this because he's a good dad. He created, God knows his children. Your kids, right? I know what my daughter's going to forget. Every morning, I know that Lucy's going to forget her water bottle for school. So every morning, I'm like, Lucy, I can't tell you how many times, don't forget your water for school. Oh, I know, Mom. And we'll get in the van. I'm like, you got your water? She's like, no. Where is it? I don't know. And so I understand. I know that she's going to forget. God looks at us the same. He's like, I know you're going to forget. So I'm going to keep repeating and reiterating and instructing you to remember. Don't forget my works. Recall what I have done. You are going to forget. It's just human nature. My daughter, my firstborn, a couple years ago, she started to have all these respiratory issues. And what we didn't know was we'd actually have like a 3 to 4 years. She's coming out of it now, and God is God's good. I've got some stones of remembrance here, and that he's really healed her and brought us through. But she had about 3 to 4 years of just continually getting the same illness, getting really sick. She got pneumonia 4 times in 1 year, was hospitalized. It was crazy. But what would happen was every time she was sick, God was near. Every time we would see miracles. Every time she would come out on the other side, we were okay. We got surrounded by community. We would get taken care of financially. Like God had met us every time she got sick. However, every time the fever would start, the symptoms would come, I, in my own human nature, would begin to forget. I would forget how God met me. I'd forget how he was near, and I would start to worry, and I'd get anxious, and I'd get fearful, and I would have to really snap myself back. Okay, remember what God did before. Remember he already met you here. Remember he already brought you out of this. Remember. And so God instructs us to remember because he knows he's going to forget. Deuteronomy 6:12, it says, then take care lest you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Listen, when God speaks, we pay attention. He says, lest you forget who brought you out of the land of Egypt. He's telling them, I know you're going to forget. You think, how could you forget a miracle like getting taken out of captivity and led into freedom? How could they forget that? But they were going to. And he warned the Israelites, don't forget. Because every time they forgot, they stopped progressing. Every time they forgot what God had done, every time they forgot the Red Sea moment, every time they forgot what he did, that he led them out of slavery, they would stop progressing towards the promised land. How did an 11-day journey take 40 years? They kept forgetting the works of God. And then they would forget and they would complain. You complaining in your life, you might be in a place of forgetting what God's done. They would get angry. Damn, we want to go back. We want to go back to Egypt where it was easy. And we want to go, they'd get angry. They'd get angry at Moses. They'd get angry at God. They would complain. They'd forget. They'd get scared. They would worry. They would have anxiety. Whenever they forgot, they stopped progressing. Forgetting will keep you from taking ground. Listen, you've got ground in your life to take. You have some victory to move towards. And so for me, in my motherhood, I was raised with the moms and grandmothers and great-grandmothers in my family had a history of anxiety and fear because there were several women who had lost their children. Children had passed away before the mother. And so I knew I had ground to take in my motherhood journey. I will not parent out of fear and anxiety. I will not worry that God is going to, that I'm going to lose my child. So I understood there was some ground I needed to take in my parenthood journey for my future generation line, for my inheritance. I am not going to hand my daughter fear and anxiety around motherhood. But if I forgot the works of God, I would stop taking that ground. You have ground to take, and you need to remember. So stones of remembrance help us do this. What does it look like in your life? Here's the really encouraging thing. It is so practical and easy to do this. Building stones of remembrance, building memorials in your life looks like, one, talk about it. Talk about it. How often do we ask people, what is God doing in your life? Not how are you? What is God up to in your life? If you ask that question, it's actually a little bit sad. People will really struggle to tell you. If I say, what's God doing in your life? We're so not used to meditating on the works of God. We're so not used to having this remembrance built in that people will go I don't know, it's been a while. It's been a long time since I've seen a miracle, since I've had some breakthrough. I'm kind of, I don't know what God's up to in my life. I'm like, what? You're breathing. Your heart is pumping blood through your body. You woke up today. I'm sure you got a family. You've got clothes. You're kicking. You're alive. You're standing right before me. That is a miracle. Give thanks to the Lord. Right? This is the day that the Lord has made. We will give thanks. The sun rose. What do you mean? What's God doing in your life? If you've got nothing else to point to, you can say, I'm breathing, baby. I am here today. How many of you are in this chair and you're like, yeah, I could actually tell you a lot of reasons why I shouldn't be here, but here I am. That's what God is up to in your life. You just need to start giving him credit. He is up to something. There is so much activity of God in your life. If we would get in the habit of going, that's God. He's doing that. I'm going to remember that. So you talk about it. Tell your salvation story. I love asking people how they came to know Jesus. I love a salvation story. And it's so crazy. I could pick out anyone in this room, the person who probably thinks I've got the most boring, not crazy, coming to know Jesus story. And if I began to sit down with you and you told me how you came to know him, it would be filled with miracles. It'd be filled with little details and nuances of God pursuing you. And yeah, you know what? Actually, how many of us are, it's the craziest thing, or coincidentally, or, it was just the most random person reached out to me. That is an activity of God. And as you tell your salvation story, you're building a memorial to what God did in your life. He took you out of darkness and placed you into light. You were headed for destruction and he changed course. And now here you are in a community of a local church that's going after the Tri-Cities revival and awakening. Like, that is a miracle of God that you're here today. So you could talk about it. Tell your salvation story. Tell testimonies. Testimony is so vital to us staying in a place of faith. The testimony of Jesus, the testimony of what God is doing, just repeating this. So you talk about it. Record words, like recording prophetic words, promises, or prayers. Actually recording them is so important because it's actually showing stewardship. It's showing the Lord, I'm taking you seriously. Your word doesn't return void. I'm taking it seriously. I'm going to record this promise. I'm going to record this word that someone has for me, and I'm going to play it back. Last night I got a phone call, 10 o'clock at night, a young preacher. He's booming right now. He's a young guy. He's coming up, and he's getting well known. Like, there's a call of God on his life. In October, I was driving, and the Lord placed him on my heart. And I began to pray for him, and the Lord said, send him an audio message. I don't do that often, but I did. I sent him an audio message on the phone while I was driving, and I said, hey, I'm praying for you today. Here's what I think God's doing in your life. I'm going to go out on a limb, and there was this word, encouraging word. I felt like the Lord said to give it, and I sent it to him, and it was October 2nd, and the word was around like, hey, when the holidays come, like around December, I really think something's going to shift for you. I feel like God's doing something profound in your life. He got it. Now, he said, thank you so much. That was really encouraging. That came at the right time. And then I didn't hear from him. That was October 2nd. It's now the end of November. He calls me up yesterday, and he said, that word came at the craziest time. I was in a really low place. I was strapped financially. Opportunities were closing in on me. I did not know what my future was. That word came at the right time. And he said, I didn't know what to do with it except play it. He said, I played that word every day. Every day I would play it. He said, I'd work out and I'd pray. He's like, I know your voice. Like, this is awkward. Like, I know your voice because I played that word so much, because he wanted to steward the word of God. He wanted to say, God, I trust you. I'm believing into this. I don't know exactly what it means. And so he played that word every day. Simple. It was a minute, 45-second voice memo. And he just played it and let it fill him with faith and hope. It was a stone of remembrance that God was speaking to someone across the nation about him and his situation, put forth a promise, and it is the end of November. He just got one of the most crazy ministry opportunities. His whole financial situation turned around. He's in a brand new place, had breakthrough in his health. Like, he is in a different season. And he said, I know it is because I stewarded that word that you gave me. It's so crazy. So much of we want a fresh word from God. We want God to speak to us. But every time he does, we just hear it and forget it and keep moving on. And we just consume words and then and we don't hold on to them. We don't ruminate on them. We don't meditate on them. We don't remind God of them. And then we're desperate for another one. You got to start stewarding what you got. What did God speak over you when you were 12 years old? What did God say to you when you were a teenager? What was that encounter you had in your 20s when he said, I'm going to do something with your life? Like, hold that. That is a way we can remember in our life. And then third, another practical, write it down. Like, just write it down. I don't care if you're not a huge journaler. Like, you can get a piece of paper or get something, the notes app in your phone, and just begin to actually record when God moves in your life. And I don't care if it's someone in the drive-thru in front of me at Starbucks paid for my coffee. That really blessed me. That's a work of God in your life. I got prayer today, and it encouraged me. A relationship got reconciled. I got a bump in pay. You know, when Derek and I were first married, we got married at 19 and 20. Our family was in Indiana. We moved to California, so we're away from family. We're young and broke. Most marriages start out right this way. When you're young, married, we're just broke. And then we were broke and we were broke some more. Like we had nothing. Couldn't buy groceries, couldn't pay our bills. And it was getting, to the point where we're like, we're going to get evicted from this apartment. So our pastor at the time, Bill Johnson, had given this teaching about writing down when God blesses you. If you want to attract blessing, steward the blessings you've been given and write it down and remember them. It was this concept of remembering. So we took this legal pad and I just wrote down gifts. And I remember the first gift, somebody had given us $5. And I said, okay, I wrote down, given $5. Now that didn't make a dent in what we needed, $5. And then we'd write down when someone would give us $15. Then we'd write down, someone dropped off groceries today. Someone paid the other half of our rent. That bill got taken care of. And all of a sudden, that piece of paper grew to pages. God kept meeting us because we kept recording it. Said, God, I'm not going to overlook this. I'm not going to give this to coincidence. I'm not going to give this to someone just being randomly generous. You are moving on my behalf. You're the God of the impossible. You're the God of provision. And I began to record it, and it built a memorial in our life. I still have the legal pad. I promise you. I still have the legal pad pages, and it's folded up, and it's placed in a special place, and it is a stone of remembrance in our life. And what it did early on in our marriage, God wanted to establish, you will not doubt me as a provider. And it was proven to me. And so, you know what? We've been broke, but we've been broke again, right? And we've had financial struggles, but we look back and we say, what do those stones mean to you? That God is our provider, that he's taking care of us, that he's for us and not against us. And you just can't convince me otherwise. You just can't convince me otherwise because I have a memorial built in my life. This is the blessing of remembering. God commands us to remember his work in our lives because he wants to do them again. Listen, remembering what God has done in your life positions him to move again. It's the jogging of our memory that brings us back into an experience, right? We have this experience with music. Music's the easiest, I think, most universal experience that I think we all share. When you hear a song that takes you back to a moment in childhood or in your adolescence, we love music from our teenage years because we're getting formed in our teenage years. And so it's those formative years. And so when we hear the songs, right, whatever decade you were a teenager, some of you, when I hit the disco button, you're like, I remember when I was, in the discotheque, or it's the music of the 80s, like I'm sure you love Twisted Christians, that's Striper, I don't know, 80s Christian rock band, sure, yeah, Journey, there you go, Journey, Bon Jovi, when Matt had lots of flowing hair like Austin. Or a song, anybody have a breakup song, first dance song, your wedding song, you hear and you're like just taken back to that moment. It's a powerful experience. Remembering what God has done puts you back into that place of faith for him to do it again. Listen, can I geek out with you guys on some science? Yeah, we're all right. This is not me. This is science. Here's my source, science, okay? Scientists tell us that our storage capacity for memory is virtually unlimited. They estimate that our brains can store roughly 2.5 petabytes of data, which is about 300 years worth of TV. My 9-year-old has achieved this. However, what gets stored depends on what we deem as important. The brain is constantly processing the flood of information it encounters every day, assigning each package of data a different level of importance and storing that data accordingly. So short-term memory is information we hold on to before dismissing it or transferring it to long-term memory. The most basic way our brains determine what information is important enough to store in long-term memory is repetition. Repeated experience tells our brains to pay attention and keep that information in a retrievable place because we'll probably need it again. Repetition can be built into our experience simply by the nature of it, like things you encounter daily, or created by choice. Why do you repeatedly remember the work of God? So that it gets stored into long-term memory. And the revelation of who God is as a provider and who God is as the miracle-working God gets stored into a retrievable place so that when I show up to the flooded riverbank, I can pull information that says, my God is the God of miracles. He will part this water again. He's done it before. I'm remembering who he is. And the revelation of that has now transformed how I approach impossible situations. So why are we called to remember? Because God's like, I want to do it again. I want to do it again. So he expects us to pay attention when he moves. He expects us to remember it. So he says, build these stones of remembrance. They cross the Jordan. He goes, I just proved myself to you. So put up these stones and remember, I'm the God who parts waters. And listen, some of you need to reconcile this morning, that not only is he the God who can, he is the God who wants to. Yeah. Some of you believe he's able, just not willing. That's a whole nother sermon. Come back next week. Matt will finish that out. He is able, and he is willing. He is willing to move on your behalf. He wants to show up in your life. Because the reality is, we know this, that river crossing moments are going to happen. Doesn't mean you're in the wrong place. Impossible situations are going to happen. You know, I love the Bible. I'm going to eat it. They did somewhere in the Old Testament. They ate the scroll. Dip it in some honey, little sriracha. Second service, what just happened? You know, I love the word and how in just the details and the specificity of it is so, like, you know, there's just nothing that's wasted here. Everything's intentional. And they show up to the Jordan. You know, this moment at the Jordan River is at the same time of year that the Red Sea happened. The same barrier, same time of year that was as they were leaving captivity, showed up again as they're about to enter the promised land. Same barrier, water, same time of year. You know, all that to say, just because you're in an impossible situation doesn't mean you're out of step with God. He actually leads us to stages and places for his power to be displayed. It is our job to show up to that body of water and say, this is what my God can do, because I remember he's done it before. So remember. And you know, when you start building that memorial for yourself, is it after you cross the waters? Is it after the breakthrough comes? They took the stones from the midst of the Jordan, in the middle of the crossing, in the muddy waters, when they're dealing with getting everybody across. Don't touch or drop the Ark of the Covenant. They got a lot to manage. They're in the middle of that journey. And God's like, hey, while you're in the middle crossing, start picking up some big old rocks to take with you. So in the middle of your process, I'm not through to the other side, but that bill got paid. Gosh, I'm still in debt, but this is a miracle. I'm picking up this rock and I'm taking this with me on my journey. Are we in full reconciliation in my family? No, but a relationship just slightly improved, and I'm going to take that with me. I'm pick up that rock, and I'm taking that with me to the other side. And you're showing God, I am paying attention to when you move. I'm going to remember your works in my life. This is not wasted on me, and I'm going to remember this. So you take it in the midst. Memory creates hope, you guys. If you're hopeless, you might not be remembering. The New Bible Commentary says remembering the past plays a vital role in the identity of any nation. We teach history. We understand. It's so funny. We understand this in the natural. We understand the importance of origin story. We understand the importance of history. And sociologists say that a society aspiring to endure must become a community of memory and therefore hope. Memory creates hope. If we want to endure as a body of believers who are filled with the hope of Christ, we have to remember. We have to remember. We have to remember what he's done. Some of us are waiting on God to do the next big thing, and we won't meditate on the old thing. We're waiting for him to show up in the new miraculous way, but we actually have forgotten all the ways he's already moved, already met us, already taken care of us. We can't be hopeful if we can't recall. And so while we wait for the new work, what do? Do we complain and grumble and doubt? No, we remember the old work. Psalm 77:11, I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. He understood this concept. I'm going to remember your deeds of old. What God has done in the past is very relevant to what he wants to do in your future. And so remembering what he has done, it's not only beneficial for us, that's the blessing in remembering, but it is for those around you as well. And we'll end with this. We're not only called to remember for ourselves, we're called to help others remember. Verse 6, that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, what do those stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. One of the stated purposes of these stones was to teach their children about who God was. Listen, the faith of the next generation will be shaped by our ability to tell them about the works of God. We want to get frustrated that the next generation's, deconstructing and getting confused and veering away from truth. And I'm like, you know what? We're the ones responsible to keep pointing them to what God's already done. Maybe they don't have anything to look at and say, what do those stones mean to you? And then we get an ability, an opportunity to display the works of God. Let me tell you what they mean to me. I was down and out and God met me and saved me and delivered me. And we just have this culture and this habit and it's just woven in where we are remembering what God's done and we're sharing with others. And then it's teaching them about the character and nature of God. This is what we do with parenting, right? I tell my kids all the time, the house that we live in, it's such a miraculous story. I find that a lot of home buying journeys are often very stressful and, then the details that go into it. And it's I find that they're always just kind of like salvation stories. I'm like, man, God came through for you to get in that house. And so this house that we're in, it was a really crazy situation and we got into it and it's everything we need for our family as we grow and do what God's called us to do. And I will tell my kids about it. When they're swimming in the pool in the summer, I'm like, let me tell you about what God had to do, about how God met us and how he moved. And I begin to point them to a memorial. Because I remember, I have the whole timeline of our house buying journey. I have it in my notes app on my phone. And I'll just revisit it when I need to stir my faith. I'm like, man, God met me. Now my kids are 9 and 4, so I don't, I'm not like, the inflation, was booming, and we had a jumbo VA loan because Papa fought in Vietnam, so we really had to figure out this thing when we locked in the rate, and then the realtor, and actually they countered, and it was crazy, the inspection. It's not that. But I tell them in a way that's appropriate for my children. And I say, let me tell you about what God did to get us in this house. And my daughter actually, during the journey of buying this house, we played this worship song and we would drive through the neighborhood and we changed the words. We changed the words. So our house needed to sell in order for us to get this house. We had one of those contingency things going on. So there's a song that says, show me one thing you can't do. Show me a mountain you can't move. You're the God of the breakthrough. Anything is possible. We played that song and, I want to teach my kids that to believe God for the more. And so we said, show me one house you can't sell. And we would sing that out. We would declare, we were taking ground. We're taking ground. This house is ours. And we're declaring in faith, show me one house you can't sell. And so what has happened now is that song has become a modern day memorial in my 9-year-old's life. And she will hear that song. It'll come, in a service or on the radio, and she'll go, oh, it's our house song. I go, yeah, baby, what do those stones mean to you? That God was looking out for us when we were buying that house. He knew what we needed. He sold our house in just the right time. Because I want her as a 16-year-old to be able to retrieve that information. When she shows up to an impossible situation in her life, she's got something that tells her about the wonders and work of God. So it doesn't only benefit me, it benefits others. It benefits our children. And if you and I need to be reminded, your neighbors need to be reminded, and your coworkers, and your family members. And so together, what would it look like if we just talked about the wonders of God? Not just we do testimony time. Worship team can come on up. We do testimony time at staff meeting, and It's funny, Jesus Culture staff, we have a culture of testimony. We value the testimony because we want God to repeat it. And so we talk all the time about what God's doing. And it's so funny, even after, 20 years of being an organization and doing testimony time at staff meeting, people will still say, before they share a testimony, I don't know if you've ever done this or heard this, people will go, well, it's not really a big one, but And every time we go, hold on, that doesn't exist. It's not a big one, not a small one. The Jordan River was no less miraculous and powerful because it wasn't the Red Sea. It's still God moving in someone's life. It's still God doing something prolific. And God doesn't go, this is just a little miracle for you. Like, God doesn't rate them that way. It's the testimony. It's the work of God. Like, and it is on us to look at that with the proper perspective and remember together as a community and say, don't say that's just a small testimony. You know, like, what's God doing in your life? Well, nothing much. I'm just here. Hold on. You're here. Hallelujah. Someone thankful that you're here in the room. I'm going to celebrate that. What would happen in our meetings and gatherings and living rooms if we began to have a culture of celebrating the activity of God? I think it would attract heaven. I think it would be amazing. And so just stories, conversations, you just remind people, bring truth to people about who God is. And you know what's powerful? When you become a person of remembrance, when you show up to an unbeliever or someone wavering in their faith or a doubtful family member, you show up and you begin to tell of the works of God, you have stories to back it up. And they can't talk you out of it or cynic you out of it or criticize you out of it. Like, no one can talk me out of the miraculous way God showed up for me my first year of marriage financially. Like, you can't tell me enough discouraging stories. I'm like, but I have a memorial. I've got something, and this is why, like, they had something to look at. And they had these popped up all through the land, just piles of rocks. And they'd walk through and they wanted people to journey. They wanted the little kids to point to it and say, what's that one? God met me here. God spoke to one of our fathers. God gave a prompt, and they just had this culture. So as we end, we're going to go into a worship song and end with I just want you to take a moment and prayerfully consider, prayerfully look at your life. Have I forgotten the victories that I have with God? Have I given myself too much credit? Have I given other people too much credit? And start to turn your heart towards and reevaluate and reflect. I'll end with this story, I promise. So sorry, gone over. Second service, they're fine. Kids are fine. Oh, everybody with kids, you're like, keep going, please. It's our babysitting hour. I get it, I got 3 of them. We had a couple over for dinner a couple months ago, a couple from our church. And we're sitting down there, my husband and I, and they're another couple, and I just, I love Jesus stories, salvation stories. So I said, tell me your story. How'd you come to know Jesus? And I didn't know this about him, but he has a crazy story of he was addicted, just saturated in addiction, broken, had hit rock bottom, was in a crack house, vomiting over a toilet, if you want to be specific, hit rock bottom. And God began to speak to him, heard the audible voice of God, and began to turn his life around. From that, living in those conditions, had lost everything, was completely strung out, and God began to move in his life. And now he's a pastor, he's a traveling preacher, he's got a beautiful family. And I didn't realize, as he began to tell me his story, I didn't realize I had lost faith for my brother, who I've been contending for and praying for 17 years, who's just locked in addiction. He's so broken and lost. And I've gone through seasons, I've put his name on prayer walls and on prayer slips and, raised my hands for him and had other people pray for him. And as this man began to tell me his story, I felt hope. I felt it. I felt the physical manifestation. I can't describe it. I felt myself filled with hope. I felt all the hopeless places that I had for my own brother. He was reminding me, he's pointing to me. He's pointing to his stone, saying, this is what God did in my life. And all of a sudden, I begin to benefit. And I begin to believe again that there's nobody too far gone, that there's nobody too lost, that there's nobody who's blown it too much. And I begin to believe again. And I got filled with hope. And I got filled with a renewed faith that got ignited in me. And it changed the way I started to pray for my brother. It changed the way I started to believe for him. His story, his stones benefited my life, and it will It will come to fruition in my brother's life. I know that. I am standing on that. So this is what remembering does. Will you stand with me? And just take an account over the next few minutes. Just take an account. I just pray for you quickly. Holy Spirit, I pray that you would use this as a reminder and that you would begin to show us the places that we've forgotten. Show us where we've not attributed the work of God to you, where we've taken credit or we've overlooked it. And would you begin to shift us and grace us and equip us to be a people who will build stones of remembrance throughout our lives for ourselves and our generation.